Tom Cruise exposes Diddy on day 14 of Diddy's trial and recounts all the horrible things Diddy did to him during a 1996 party. Manhattan's federal court was suffocating with anticipation. The clock struck 9 a.m., and the heavy oak doors creaked open with a foreboding groan. In walked Tom Cruise, his trademark intensity now shadowed by something heavier, an inner weight. Dressed in a tailored charcoal gray suit and flanked by two stern-faced U.S. Marshals, the Hollywood Titan moved slowly but with undeniable presence, as if stepping onto the most dangerous set of his life. The courtroom fell into absolute silence. Spectators leaned forward, barely breathing. Phones were gripped but not raised. No one dared interrupt the gravity of the moment. In the gallery, a woman whispered, "Is that really him?" Another murmured, "He looks like he's seen a ghost." Even Judge Arun Subramanian momentarily froze, his gavel hovering midair before nodding solemnly. On the defense side, Sean "Diddy" Combs sat rigid, the color draining from his face. His usually relaxed demeanor was replaced by cold stillness. His attorneys, Mark Agnifilo and Tenny Garagos, leaned toward each other in hushed, frantic whispers. On the prosecution's bench, U.S. attorneys Damian Williams, Emily Johnson, and Maureen Comey exchanged measured glances. Cruise took the stand. He raised his right hand. The oath was administered. The mission was no longer fiction. Cruise's voice, though calm, carried a faint tremor that instantly commanded the room. His eyes, usually bright with screen-ready charm, were now clouded by memory. After Mission Impossible premiered in 1996, Diddy invited me to a private party at his mansion in Los Angeles, he began, glancing briefly at the jury. Said it was to celebrate the film. I thought it was genuine. I was wrong. U.S. Attorney Emily Johnson leaned forward from the prosecution table, her voice precise. "Mr. Cruise, please tell the court what happened that night." He nodded slowly. It started like any typical high-profile party. There were celebrities everywhere, musicians, actors, producers. People were dancing, laughing. It felt celebratory. Diddy was the perfect host, or so I thought. Cruise shifted in his seat, his hands tightening slightly as he spoke. At some point, he pulled me aside, said he wanted to show me something special, a real Hollywood initiation. I didn't understand what he meant, but I followed him. He paused, eyes fixed on a point beyond the courtroom. He led me to a secluded wing of the mansion. It was like stepping into another world. The walls were covered in black velvet. There were candles, hundreds of them, lined up like a ritual. In the center of the room was a massive pool. At first glance, I thought it was filled with red wine. Cruise swallowed hard, his voice lower now. But then I smelled it. It wasn't wine. The room tensed. Gasps rippled quietly through the public gallery. Judge Subramanian leaned forward slightly, lips pressed in a thin line. "It was thicker, metallic," Cruise continued. And that's when he looked at me and said, "This is how legends are born." Gasps echoed through the courtroom gallery like distant thunder as Tom Cruise steadied himself and continued. His voice was haunted now, no longer just recounting events, but reliving them in real time. Diddy looked at me and said, "If you want real power, you bathe in this. That's how legends are made. That's how you earn respect." The words hung in the courtroom like smoke. Judge Subramanian glanced over his glasses, face unreadable. Several jurors shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Cruise's gaze darkened as he spoke. The pool, whatever it was filled with, looked thick and dark. At first, I thought this had to be some twisted prank. But then people appeared. Figures in masks, cloaks. They circled the pool, silent at first. Then they started chanting. Low, rhythmic. Words I couldn't understand. It was like something out of a nightmare. U.S. Attorney Emily Johnson's voice sliced through the silence. "Mr. Cruise, were any of these individuals recognizable to you?" He hesitated. "Not then. But over the years, some of those faces, their voices, even mannerisms, I saw them again. Industry events, award shows, they weren't strangers, they were part of the machine." The gallery murmured, prompting Judge Subramanian to issue a stern warning. "One more outburst and I'll clear the room." Cruise went on. He told me to strip, said this was the only way to truly arrive. I was terrified, but I didn't want to seem weak. I thought, this is Diddy. Maybe this is just eccentric Hollywood stuff, so I stepped into the pool. Johnson pressed again, her voice carefully neutral. "Was it animal blood?" Cruise shook his head slowly. "I don't know. I didn't ask. I just remember the cold, how it clung to my skin. and how Diddy stood at the edge, smiling, like he had just won something. That smile, Cruz testified, would haunt him for decades. The tension in the courtroom thickened as defense attorney Mark Agnifilo sprang to his feet, his tone sharp, cutting through the silence like a blade. "Mr. Cruz," he began, pacing deliberately before the jury, "with all due respect, are you testifying that you, an adult man, a seasoned Hollywood superstar, voluntarily entered this pool of blood?" Before Cruz could respond, U.S. Attorney Emily Johnson rose like a shot. "Objection, Your Honor. Argumentative." "Sustained," Judge Subramanian said firmly. "Counselor, rephrase your question." Agnifilo nodded, feigning restraint. He walked back to the defense table, straightened his tie, then returned to center stage. "Mr. Cruz," he said, his voice calmer, "did anyone physically force you to enter that pool?" Cruz sat still, then spoke with quiet conviction. "No one pushed me in, if that's what you're asking, but that's not the same as choice." Agnifilo raised an eyebrow. "Please explain." Cruz leaned in slightly, locking eyes with the jury. "When a man like Diddy, who owns rooms, controls headlines, and surrounds himself with people whose loyalty is bought and sealed in blood, tells you this is how legends are made, you listen. When you're isolated in a mansion filled with power brokers and masks, when the only escape is to go along or be cast out, you don't feel like you have a choice." He paused. "There's physical force, and then there's psychological imprisonment." Agnifilo smirked. "So your argument is you were brainwashed?" Before Cruz could reply, Tenny Giragos leaned in to whisper something to Agnifilo, who gave a small nod and took a step back. "No further questions, for now," he said. The courtroom buzzed with barely suppressed tension. Reporters scratched notes. Gallery members exchanged wide-eyed looks. Diddy sat motionless, staring ahead as if carved in stone. Judge Subramanian took a long breath and addressed the court. "Let's be clear, this trial is not about what you expect from a tabloid. These are allegations of coercion, abuse, and manipulation at the highest levels of influence. Let the evidence speak." Cruz remained on the stand, his face pale but resolute. The weight of truth, or the cost of it, hung palpably in the air. After a tense pause, U.S. Attorney Damian Williams stood and approached the witness stand with a steady calm. "Mr. Cruz," he said, his voice echoing in the charged atmosphere of the courtroom, "were there other celebrities present during this so-called ritual?" Cruz exhaled slowly, his jaw tight with deliberation. "Yes," he said, "there were others. I saw people, faces I knew, people you've all seen on magazine covers and movie posters." A ripple of noise spread across the gallery like a wave, prompting Judge Arun Subramanian to glance up sharply, gavel at the ready. "But I won't name them here," Cruz added, eyes scanning the gallery. "Not yet, because I know what happens to people who talk. Careers vanish, people disappear. What I will say is this: what happened to me wasn't a fluke. It wasn't some spontaneous Hollywood madness. It was a ceremony, and Diddy ran it like a general commands a battlefield." The room erupted in murmurs, journalists scribbling furiously, courtroom sketch artists wide-eyed, spectators exchanging alarmed looks. Diddy sat motionless, but the muscles in his jaw twitched. Tenny Giragos leaned in to whisper to him, her expression unreadable. Judge Subramanian slammed his gavel. "Order, or I will clear this room." Silence returned like a falling curtain. Damian Williams resumed. "Mr. Cruz, when you say he ran it like a general, what exactly do you mean?" Cruz didn't hesitate. Every movement was rehearsed. Everyone knew their place. The chanting, the timing, the symbolism. It was all deliberate. And Diddy? He was at the center of it. Calm, controlled, directing it all with a smile. I didn't see a party host. I saw a man used to wielding power in secret. The implication hung thick in the air. Williams gave a single nod, satisfied, and returned to the prosecution table. Judge Subramanian glanced at the clock, then addressed the court. "We are adjourned for a recess. When we return, we will continue testimony. Let's be prepared to maintain decorum, or I will clear this courtroom." Cruz stepped down from the stand, his shoulders heavier than when he arrived. Diddy remained stone-faced. The storm was far from over. As the courtroom hung on every word of Tom Cruise's bombshell testimony, one man remained unsettlingly composed: Sean "Diddy" Combs. Dressed in a sleek navy suit and crisp white shirt, he sat reclined in his chair, exuding a strange calm. His eyes never left Cruz, cold, locked, and unwavering. It was the gaze of a man who had weathered storms before and had no intention of flinching now. At intervals, Diddy leaned toward Tenny Giragos, whispering in hushed tones, his face betraying no emotion. But when Cruz mentioned the ritual, his brow lifted ever so slightly, a flicker that didn't go unnoticed. A few in the gallery whispered, "He's not surprised." Then Cruz turned and looked directly at Diddy. "That's the same look he gave me that night," he said, his voice low and heavy. The look that said, "You're mine now." The tension snapped back into the room like a rubber band pulled too far. Emily Johnson stood again, gently stepping forward. "Mr. Cruz," she said, "were you ever the same after that night?" Cruz let the question hang. The room waited. "I became more famous," he finally admitted, his voice carrying the weight of the contradiction. "Yes, blockbusters, accolades, but it came at a cost." He paused, glancing toward the jury. "I lost control. I stopped knowing where the line between who I was and who I was supposed to be existed. It's like, after that night, I wasn't just acting in movies, I was acting in real life, for them." "For him?" Johnson asked, motioning subtly toward Diddy. Cruz nodded. "And I always felt watched. At premieres, on set, even at home. Not overt surveillance, just eyes. Like I belonged to something I didn't understand, and the second I questioned it, it would all be taken away." Diddy remained motionless, but something in his stare deepened, as if trying to telegraph defiance or possession. The jury watched him now too, eyes darting between the megastar on the stand and the mogul at the defense table. Judge Subramanian let the silence settle before declaring, "Proceed." The trial was no longer just about crime, it was about control. As the courtroom returned from recess, Assistant U.S. Attorney Maureen Comey rose with purpose. With Tom Cruise's testimony still echoing through the gallery, she turned her focus toward the deeper implications of what had just been revealed. Her voice was clear, unwavering, and razor-sharp. "This trial is not solely about what happened to Mr. Cruz," Comey began, pacing slowly before the jury. "This is about a pattern, systemic coercion, psychological manipulation, and the abuse of fame and influence, a culture of silence enforced through fear, money, and blackmail." She paused and gestured toward Cruz, still seated beside the prosecution team. "Tom Cruise is not here for revenge. He is not here for publicity. He is the first domino in a sequence that leads to the heart of something far more sinister." Then, without warning, she presented a new piece of evidence, a folder of grainy photographs projected on the courtroom monitor. The first image showed Cruz and Diddy standing side by side at the infamous 1996 party, both appearing dazed but smiling. The lighting was low, the ambiance surreal. The second image drew audible gasps. A dimly lit room, red candles flickering, with a third man partially obscured. His face was blurred, but his silhouette was familiar. "We will not reveal this individual's identity yet," Comey stated, "but let it be known, he is not anonymous to us, and he is not alone. We have testimony, messages, and more photos tying multiple individuals to these alleged rituals." The courtroom buzzed with tension as reporters rapidly typed notes. A single question now loomed over the proceedings. Just how deep did Diddy's influence go? Comey continued, "This isn't about one event. It's about repeated actions, coordinated secrecy, a hierarchy of control disguised as entertainment. And Mr. Combs, Sean Diddy Combs, sat at the top of that structure." Diddy shifted slightly for the first time, folding his arms and narrowing his gaze at the evidence screen. "The floodgates are open," Comey said, concluding, "and more will come through." Judge Subramanian nodded gravely. "Let the record reflect the admission of Exhibit 34. The court will recess briefly before resuming cross-examination." But the gallery knew this was no longer just a trial, it was an unraveling. As the courtroom drama reached fever pitch, the scene outside the Manhattan Federal Courthouse had transformed into a frenzied battleground of opinion, outrage, and spectacle. News vans lined the streets, drone cameras buzzed overhead. Barricades groaned under the weight of crowds pressed shoulder to shoulder, some chanting support for Tom Cruise, others screaming for proof, and still more defending Diddy with homemade signs that read, "No blood, no lies," and "This is character assassination." Police officers maintained tight formations as protesters and counter-protesters clashed. One group held up cardboard cutouts of Cruise with angel wings, another mocked him with vampire fangs and the label "Oscar-worthy liar." Social media platforms ignited like dry tinder. The hashtag Bloodbath Hollywood trended at #1 within an hour. TikTok was flooded with dramatic reenactments of Cruz's testimony, while conspiracy theorists on X, formerly Twitter, and Reddit flooded threads with claims of a secret Hollywood cabal finally being exposed. Entertainment news anchors struggled to keep up. "We are witnessing the collision of fame, fear, and folklore," said CNN's Susan Tran during a breaking segment. "This is no longer about a criminal case. It's about the soul of the entertainment industry." Back in Los Angeles, Hollywood insiders began distancing themselves from Diddy. A-list collaborators deleted photos, labels paused promotional campaigns, and publicists rushed out neutral statements. "We are monitoring the situation closely." One anonymous studio executive told Variety, "If even half of what Cruz is saying is true, this is the end of an era." Other celebrities remained quiet, eerily so. Late-night talk shows aired reruns. Industry insiders whispered that more subpoenas were on the way, and the Department of Justice was reportedly expanding the investigation into other entertainment power players. But for the public, it was déjà vu with a sinister twist. "This feels like Eyes Wide Shut meets Law and Order," said MSNBC anchor Joel Kramer. Except it's not fiction. It's real. It's in our courts, and it's shaking the very foundation of celebrity culture. As dusk fell over the courthouse, protesters lit candles. Some prayed, others live-streamed. And everyone, whether in awe or horror, waited for what would come next. As the sun began to dip below the skyline, casting long shadows over the Manhattan Federal Courthouse, Judge Arun Subramanian called the court to order for the day's final moments. The weight of the proceedings seemed to settle on his shoulders, visible in the subtle furrow of his brow and the deliberate tone he took when addressing the courtroom. "This court is not a place for theatrics or speculation," Judge Subramanian began, his voice steady but heavy with gravity. "We are here to seek truth that is grounded in facts, evidence, and the rule of law." The judge's eyes scanned the courtroom, briefly resting on Tom Cruise, then shifting toward Sean "Diddy" Combs, whose stoic expression showed no hint of reaction. "But," the judge continued, "the evidence being presented, Mr. Cruz's testimony, the photographs, and the witnesses yet to come, suggests something far more troubling than mere celebrity gossip or personal vendettas. We are confronted with allegations of a deeply disturbing abuse of power, influence, and possibly coordinated conspiracy." A hush fell over the room as the judge paused, letting the words hang heavily in the air. If Mr. Cruz's statements are substantiated by further testimony or evidence, this court will be facing a case that stretches far beyond this trial and beyond these walls. The implications for the entertainment industry, and for justice, could be profound. Judge Subramanian then fixed his gaze firmly on Diddy. "Mr. Combs, I suggest you prepare your defense very carefully. The evidence so far leaves little room for complacency." With that, the judge rapped his gavel sharply, signaling a brief recess before the court would resume. As spectators filed out, the atmosphere was thick with anticipation and unease. The trial had clearly reached a turning point. What started as a sensational celebrity dispute was morphing into a landmark case, one that might finally expose the darkest secrets hidden behind Hollywood's glitz and glamour. As Tom Cruise stepped down from the witness stand, a barrage of camera flashes erupted, momentarily blinding the courtroom gallery. His face was pale, etched with the strain of reliving decades-old trauma, but his eyes burned with unwavering resolve. Meanwhile, Sean "Diddy" Combs remained statuesque, betraying no sign of faltering. The battle lines in this high-stakes courtroom war had been unmistakably drawn. Prosecutors have made it clear that Cruz's explosive testimony is just the opening salvo. More witnesses are expected to come forward, ready to peel back the layers of secrecy surrounding these chilling allegations. Sealed documents reportedly containing new evidence and detailed accounts of similar rituals are scheduled to be unsealed in the coming week. Assistant U.S. Attorney Maureen Comey hinted at a witness list that could shake the very core of the entertainment industry, exposing networks of influence that have long operated in the shadows. Tom Cruise left the courthouse silently, flanked by U.S. Special Marshals, declining to comment to the waiting press. But the message was unmistakable. The mission he began with Mission Impossible in 1996 was never just a movie plot. This time, the stakes were painfully real, and the mission was deeply personal. The world now waits to see just how far this trial will go and who else it will touch.